Hey y'all, welcome to Tears and Joy in Your 20s. I'm your host, Julia Light, and I am so glad you're here. Navigating your 20s comes with a lot of highs and lows, a lot of freedom, and a lot of uncertainty. That's why I created a space for conversation about all of it. On this podcast, you'll hear interviews of creatives, entrepreneurs, people doing big things in their 20s telling their story, tears and joy and all. I hope this helps you know you're not alone. There's so much to look forward to, and you can savor this season right in the messy middle. Hey y'all, I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast today, Kate Millar. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, of course. I'm so glad you're here. So, Kate Millar is a poet and writer from Edinburgh, Scotland, currently completing her MFA in poetry at the New School here in New York City. You can find her poetry in Ecstasis, Gutter Magazine, Inflectionist Review, and elsewhere, and her video poetry on her YouTube channel at Kate Millar Films, and her music journalism in Atwood and Bomb magazines. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so fun to be here.
Oh my gosh, of course, of course. Kate and I were just talking about this morning. We grabbed a coffee before this and how it's just such a beautiful day and we can't believe we get to live here in New York City.
Yeah, I was literally just texting being like, oh yeah, I'm on 71st, and I even just like not even saying 71st Street, like I don't know, I felt like such a New Yorker being like,
literally,
yeah, I'm cropping the street names.
I know. And I ran into our friend in the subway station, and it's just a fun day. It's a fun day. Okay, so Kate, I would love if you would tell us your story. How you became a writer, how did you become a student at the New School, a published poet, you've moved from Scotland to New York City, like just any elements of that, the story of your 20s so far, because you're in your early 20s.
I am indeed.
Yes, but you've done a lot. So
many fit a lot into my years. I've been writing since I was a kid, like and like making up stupid stories or like playing, with my dolls or my friends or whatever, but I've been writing poetry since I was like a wee child. Like there were two poems that were like the earliest poems that I remember writing. One was about really, really wanting a kitten because my parents were both allergic to like any like fluffy animal. So I just like literally yearned for a kitten and wrote a poem about it. And then I also wrote a poem addressed to a tree that was out the back of my house. And like it was so it was like such a, I like this tree was like my grandfather. I don't know why I was so comforted by it, so I like wrote this like ode to the tree.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then as I got older I just continued writing, but in my undergrad I did just straight English, so purely academic. I did one creative writing class, but it was just an English literature degree at the University of St Andrews, which is such a lovely little town, like a seaside town in the northeast of Scotland, and it's like got 3 streets, 3 beaches, loads of fields. It's so beautiful, but like the opposite of New York. Like literally by the end of my 4 years there I was like, oh my goodness, I definitely need some like newness and adventure and novelty. I was studying the New York School of Poets, which is this group of poets in the 50s and 60s that were really talented, really influential to my own poetic style. Yeah, they were all based in New York, and then I was learning about the folk revival, like with Bob Dylan, also happening in New York, and I was like, wait a minute, I feel like New York is like this cultural center and like I feel like it's a very generative space to be in.
Yeah.
Rather than like this kind of like hermitage nature retreat vibe that is St Andrews, which was lovely. But yeah, so then I just applied to loads of places, and then I got into 2 places in New York, and I was so stressed about that decision, because one was the New School, which is this very avant-garde experimental school that's a little bit more like flexible and gives you a lot more control, very much like 50-50 workshop and then receiving instruction, learning and reading literature. Whereas the other place that I'd gotten into with this Ivy League institution, 75% of the classes were just literature classes, and then there was 1 workshop per semester, and I was just like, this feels like it might be a repeat of my undergrad, but also I was like, oh, but it would be really cool to say that I went to this university.
League. Yeah.
But like that was a hard moment for me, because I was like, okay, what do I value? Part of me does value prestige, like I have to admit, but actually like when it came down to it, I was like, hey, what do I need as a writer and as a human? And I was like, actually I need to kind of set aside my ego for the sake of these higher values that I hold, which is like creativity. I was basically trying to like break up with this toxic need to impress people. So weird, but like how will I ever write an authentic poem or essay or piece of fiction or whatever if I'm just trying to write what I think will impress someone? Like there's no soul in a piece of writing that's like that. I've written so many poems that just sound good, but actually are saying nothing because I'm just trying to impress people. So I feel like that was like tied to why I decided. I also did literally flip a coin in this like chapel in St. Andrews, and I was like, Lord, you choose what way I go. And then I did land on the new school, which is funny.
Okay, so you moved to New York. You're studying poetry and creative writing. You're finishing your second year now. You're finishing your degree. You're almost done.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's exciting. Tell us about, I imagine that it can't have been extremely easy to move from a beautiful, quaint, relaxing town in Scotland to New York City. So can you tell us about that transition and maybe some of the challenges that have come up?
Yes, that is such a very perceptive question. I think that is like, that was the key difficulty to moving to New York. And I had not anticipated it at all, actually, because I was just like, I had felt so ready for the change, and I was just like craving like activity and newness and adventure, that I was like, oh, it'll be totally fine. And since I had briefly lived in America as a child, I was like, oh, like there won't be a culture shock. But I was blindsided. I was like, oh my gosh, like it is sensory overload all the time. Like there's just, as soon as you, like I was living, when I first moved, I was living in dorm on 5th Avenue and 14th Street, which is like the heart of like New York. Like it's right by Union Square. I was in a dorm where I was like sharing a bedroom. My roommate was great, kind and considerate and stuff, but she also like, she just worked from home all day, doing game design. So she would like go to bed like at 5 a.m. and then like sleep through the day and things. So like it was just stupid of the dorms for like pairing us, because we had like completely opposite sleep schedules.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible.
So it was really hard because I'm an introvert and I need solitude to recharge. Also just like to write anything as well. I feel like you need to have space to actually be able to be undistracted. But like,
absolutely. Yeah.
There are so many distractions in the city, and I think that is like one of the hardest things. And also I felt like this pressure as soon as I arrived to experience everything immediately.
Yes.
Like I was like, oh my word, like I'm here now, so I need to make the most of it. I need to literally do everything, meet everyone. Like what if I miss an opportunity? What if I like don't meet, whether it's like meeting a person that would be professionally helpful to me, or even just like meeting a person who would be like a dear friend.
Yeah.
Or like any kind of significant person in your life. Like I was just so worried that if I didn't turn up to this one event or this one place, I was so afraid of like the consequences of missing out to like such an extreme level, because I feel like literally any given moment there are probably infinity, even though that's not an actual number. There are so many things that we could be doing.
Yes.
And like right now we could be walking around Central Park, or we could be in Prospect Park, or we could be at the Guggenheim, or we could be like
at the Met,
or we could be like, I don't know, like getting biscuits in Harlem Biscuit Company, like
getting tickets to a show tonight. Like
literally so many things for us to do. And I was like, and especially because I kind of moved to New York in order to experience stuff and newness and like adventure and like try and put myself in the pathway of opportunities. I then felt that pressure from myself to do that, which was like unsustainable. Like I actually got like the flu and then COVID and then the flu again, back to back to back when I first moved to New York. Also it didn't help that I like was not resting at all, because my roommate was like sleeping through the day, so as soon as I woke up I would just leave the house, and then I wouldn't come back until like 11 p.m. because my classes were in the evening. So I would be like up at 7 a.m. and then out of the house and then only home at like 11 p.m. So that was
and then you're trying to sleep and your roommate is up.
Yeah, so it's like kind of grim, but yeah, it was really hard. I didn't realize how impressionable I was. Like the city is so like attractive in a lot of ways, and it like markets itself to you, like in like literal advertising. Like, you know, if you go to like Soho especially, I feel like Soho is always when I have like these crises of like, oh my goodness, I need to like completely change my aesthetic. I need to like become a corporate girly so that I can afford all these really nice things.
Yes. Oh, that's such a thing.
Or even just like I walk past a nice store that's like perfumed on 5th Avenue, and then I smell that perfume smell and I'm like, oh, I just want to be one of those people that just like smells really nice and has a really nice like clean home, and like my values are like suddenly changing, and I'm like, what? And it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
It is so interesting. I know. And even just the messaging you see, this is probably common in any major city, or just because we all have the internet and social media, but I feel like you especially see it in New York because everything's an advertisement. Everything's like a papered, plastered digital advertisement. But this one apartment where I babysat a few times has a sign that says, "The city revolves around you." And you see that and you're like, yeah, like that sounds like a normal thing to say in New York. And then you think about it and you're like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
Dude.
The subway leaves without me. The rain rains when I don't want it to. Like, the city doesn't revolve around me.
Whoa.
But that's what people are selling.
Yeah.
It's all about you.
Mm-hmm.
Be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Buy my thing.
Mm-hmm. That is like such a perfect like emblem of, I feel like, the New York experience.
Yes.
Because also like that is like, if again, like I think I moving to New York then had to confront all these like ugly parts of my ego of like, oh my gosh, like I kind of did move here to prove myself, and like you know, I wanted to be that person who moved to New York and lived in New York. Like that's kind of cool to be like, not to be like pooping on New York, but it is still just kind of a city. Like it's just a city. I mean, it's great. It is so magical.
We love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
But I did, like, I arrived and I realized, I was like, oh wait, do I need to have 300 coffee shops to choose from? Or maybe it's kind of nice to only have to choose between 3. Like I get choice paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, so I was like texting when I first arrived in New York, I was texting all my friends back home in Scotland being like, New York is like not all it's hyped up to be, like blah blah blah. And like demystified the city. But then now I'm like, oh, I've been won over by its beauty. Like I love the chance encounters and the diversity of people that you can meet here, and like the arts and culture and the music is like my favorite part. Like it's such a like music is just like the heartbeat of the city. Like, but I think that idea of like the city revolving around you, it's like people who move to the city, we're drawn there because it's like I have this vision of myself in the city. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, what is the city for me? And I want to like live this New York Kate Millar. Like she's gonna be cool, she's gonna be like having crazy experiences, and she's gonna be writing all this cool poetry and dressing really cool and like become really artistic or whatever. And like I don't know, I think that actually wore me out. Like that idea of the city revolving around me wore me out really fast. And so that was like a big journey of realizing like, okay, I'm like my own relationship to the city and where my place is in it. Like realizing I don't need to experience everything immediately. Like I can pace myself. There are days that I can just do laundry and groceries and be a normal person.
It feels like a crime sometimes.
Yeah, literally.
So necessary. Can you tell us more about that? Like how long were you just like running before you realized that, and how did you kind of maybe make changes, or just maybe it was reflection of your own heart? Because I feel like even I've been here 5 months and I feel like so many things in my heart have just been brought to the surface. I feel like it can either stamp down what's bubbling inside and just distract, run, do fun thing, work, friends, or you're like walking down the street and you're like, this major thing is wrong in my heart, or I'm like, whatever. So tell us more.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I totally experienced that, especially whenever I first moved. I have no issue exploring places on my own. I would spend like entire days just walking around the city, but like with literally nothing but my thoughts. And because even though like the city is like just so populated with so many people, so like I was never ever alone, but I also was like so deep, like existentially alone, because like I didn't know anyone in the city. So like I was like walking around and like literally no one looks twice in New York. Like no one smiles at you in the street. Not really. Usually. Well, I mean sometimes
like, on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the Upper West Side and also in Brooklyn, like people are nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes people are like they're on a mission, and I respect that, because sometimes I also don't want to like pay attention to people. But yeah, I don't know. I think that like that weird like paradox of being, for me, like never having space to be alone, like in privacy, but then also being super alone when I'm in public, and also just in like life, it meant that I was really in my head all the time. So I just had like all of these thoughts revolving in my head, and I was really scared that like all of my good qualities of myself had been left in Scotland with all the people that I loved, just like, because that's the beauty of community, is that like all your friends and family like bring out these good sides of you. And then I was like arriving in New York realizing that, oh my gosh, like I kind of moved here because of my ego. I also now suddenly want to change what I look like, because I'm like seeing all these like beautiful like people walking the streets, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like maybe I'll be happier if I look like them, and like all my values are suddenly like way more impressionable, like
and they're challenged
they're
all
like,
the time.
changeable.
There's things coming at you,
and so like realizing that I did not have as solid a center as I thought I did, and I was like and so it was like really then easy to spiral. And then I think because I was then like mentally questioning everything and spiraling, also physically exhausting myself by not resting, I just kind of had continual breaking points where I then had to like, okay, when I had COVID, I was like, okay, cool, let's like work to find, let's make sure that we get like maybe 8 hours sleep each night, maybe 7. Like I was like, let's try and get sleep. Let's try and like eat healthier meals. There was like a piano, like a music room in our dorm, so you could just like use alone. So I started using them for like to just sit in the morning. So that was really nice. And so that was like, I was trying to incorporate the solitude that I needed. And yeah, and I think also, I didn't realize it at the time, but like friendships and community they just form, like they do grow, and it's actually quite organic.
So the time, just kind of took time of trying things out. And then how would you say, like now in your life, do you feel, because that was what, a year ago, year and a half, do you feel now a lot more grounded? Do you feel like you're still, what about the internal stuff too? How did you work through some of that?
Wow. Honestly, it links with my relationship to poetry in a strange way.
Oh, good.
Which is exciting. But I feel like poetry is this like beautiful space where you like pay attention to like either like with nature poetry, it's like you decide, okay, I'm going to pay attention to like the nature around me. Like what presence does a tree have? Like what do those leaves look like? And like there's this really good quote by a guy called James Schuyler, who's one of the New York School of Poets. Slay. One of his poems says, "Who stops to count the waving willow leaves?" or something like that. Maybe I'm misquoting it, but like it's basically maybe who stops to count the waving leaves of the willow tree, something like that. And it's basically just this idea of like the poet being this person who stops to count the leaves, who stops to notice. And like a lot of the poetry that like strikes me is whenever someone has articulated a very true existential experience, or like the love that they have for a friend or for like a family member or whatever. I feel like it is just, poetry is this like act of paying attention. And so when I was like really in my head, I was then like, okay, journaling and like writing poetry. That's actually kind of a lie. I wasn't writing poetry because I was enrolled for fiction originally. And then I decided to switch to poetry.
Oh, wow.
Which again is another God's plan thing of me ending up in the new school, because if I'd gone to the other university, I wouldn't have been allowed to change. And I think that I meant to be a poet rather than a fiction writer.
Wow.
Certainly right now. So that's a cool side quest.
Cool.
But I was like journaling a lot and like trying to like purge out these like thoughts that I had in my head. And in some ways it was helping, but in some ways it was making me feel like I was worse. Because I was like, oh my goodness, am I navel gazing? Am I like wallowing? I didn't really have like a good answer to it, but I think honestly it was having good friends as well. Like actually like a friend who you had on the podcast, Madeline, she was like such a gift to me, like in New York. Like she was one of my first dear close friends. Like I was like, oh yeah, this is like a deep friendship that I will have for like the rest of my life. And she was like someone who I could be honest with about how I was feeling. And I think that feeling of not being alone and like being able to hand it to someone else and they be like, I see you, really helped. And also just took the pressure off of myself as well. Her being like, feeling anxiety or like overwhelm is like normal, but you also don't have to like rescue yourself from it necessarily, because like the emotions like do pass. And I think that's what I didn't realize at the time, that I now looking back realize, is that like it is just actually natural when you move to a new place to just feel like really, really intense emotions. And it feels like your world is falling apart. Felt like I was like suddenly not the like person I thought I was. I was like, I'm not a stable, I thought I identified as a stable, grounded person, and suddenly that's out the window. I was like, it's actually just because you've just moved country.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big deal. And I think that's a really interesting point, because I think that a lot of us in our age or our generation feel like something's really wrong with us if we feel so disoriented. And I experienced something similar before I moved to the city, where I was just having days where some friends were in different life stages than me, and it was really hard for me to navigate. And I was at my parents' house and I was just so emotional. Or basically one of my very best friends is married and told me she was pregnant, and thrilled for her. But for some reason, me being like still single, living with my parents, saving up to move to New York, I like lost my mind. I literally was just like so emotional over it, thrilled for her, but just like, what's going on? You know, and you wonder like, is there something wrong with me because I'm having these strong emotions? I don't feel like myself. I'm whatever, but it's really just, you're 22. You're 23, you're moving, you're transitioning, your friends are changing, and obviously there's a place for actual like mental health care. Like that's a different thing. Like that is so important. And even counseling can help just with transitions, even if that's the only thing going on. But I do think just to validate, like sometimes you just feel weird, right? And it doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything deeper than the actual transition.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Literally, that actually was like the turning point as well. Like that was when, as soon as I realized that was when the emotions actually dissipated in a way. Like, because I was literally feeling the same way. There was this one day that I remember that was like really bad. I had chronically only like 5 hours of sleep, just like for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it turns out definitely was probably made worse by like lack of sleep.
Yeah, don't do that.
Because like, side note for people listening, the first thing that a doctor asks you whenever you go and say like, oh yeah, I have depression or whatever, they would be like, have you been eating? And have you been sleeping? Those are the two questions. And so one of those things I wasn't doing. So that explains why I like felt basically neurosis. Like I literally was like, I was in the Upper West Side. No, like I was in Harlem in the Lidl, like in the grocery store, and it was raining outside, and I was literally sobbing. Like I was on FaceTime to my brother first, and then to my mom. I was just like questioning everything, and I felt horrible. I felt like my like literally like the floor of my life was just like I was like so overwhelmed by my feelings. But then I did like one session of counseling.
That's great.
Which was like really helpful. And the like lady who was counseling me, she just like, because I was saying like, this is so weird. Like, why was I like reacting so like deep, like gutturally emotionally, like, and more emotional than I've ever felt before.
Yeah.
It was scary. It was disorienting. Also, like I don't really, like I get anxious, but I didn't really feel low. And I was like feeling low at that time. And she was like, it's like totally natural for you to be feeling all these things because you're actually going through growing pains of just this stage of life. You're learning autonomy. Because I think part of my anxiety at the time was like, because my parents, like my family missed me back in Scotland. So then I was like feeling guilt for living in New York, feeling guilt for like leaving my friends, feeling guilt for leaving my family. And then I was like also feeling guilt for even doing an MFA in the first place. Because I was like, it feels like I'm just this like person being indulged because I'm doing a hobby basically full time. Because I only ever did creative writing as a hobby up until this point.
Interesting.
So like, but then like the Babs is her name. She's so great. She was just like, she was like, oh, like this is just a necessary point in your life. Like this is like, you're learning to be your own person and to not just live to please your parents. So obviously like your parents love you, so they probably would be happy for you to live down the street from them for the rest of your life. And like then your friends love you, and like they will always like love you, and like so they want you to like flourish. So like they're rooting for you like over, you know, from Scotland over in New York. But like I think it was just like, but this choice for you to live in New York like and also to pursue writing is an act of like you learning full autonomy. Realizing that dissipated a lot of my guilt because it felt like it was actually a necessary, not just like forgetting actually the professional, because I think that was part of my breakdown as well, because I was like, I don't even think I'm like making any progress in my creative writing career. Like at that point I hadn't been published, I don't remember, but like I was like, I'm not even, what is this even gonna mean? Like how the MFAs even matter? Like do they even help?
Right.
Like, I was just like I literally was just like questioning everything.
Of course.
And like realizing that maybe the reason why I'm in New York is not to get a book deal, which to be honest, I'm not banking on it. But like, I think maybe the reason why I'm in New York is for me to learn to be like, to just be a autonomous adult and like to be able to like make choices based off of like a value system that I value rather than like just automatically doing what I think other people expect of me. So that was a really good, that helped me.
That's so helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting. And I think another part of, because I've also felt a little bit of guilt sometimes of living in New York. It's like, I'm still figuring out what I want to do. And I'm not, just almost feeling guilt that I have such supportive parents, or feeling guilt that, all these things. And I think learning to accept gifts as gifts and learning to accept blessings as blessings. And I was reading something a few weeks ago in scripture. I was reading the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, and for some reason I just kind of drew this conclusion from it, like all of life is an unearned gift. I don't know why that day, that just kind of what stuck in my mind. But just realizing, if I can look at just all of life is an unearned gift. And regardless of your beliefs, I feel like we can take that of gratitude. And obviously there are things in life that we earn, but there's always so much chance or so much in that it's like we never really fully earn anything, you know? And so I think if we could just learn to accept and just, that's the same with learning to accept compliments, learning to accept generosity. No one wants when they give you a compliment for you to say, no, I'm not that great. It's almost like that. So that's just an interesting thought that I had recently. But I was curious too if with your whole thing of paying attention, and poetry is paying attention. Obviously, I think you have a lens of life that's very beautiful and poetic because you're a poet. But did that help you also to get out of your head? Like, is that kind of what you were starting to say before? Was like, you're so stuck in your head. You're journaling about yourself. You're, what is it called? Navel gazing?
Yeah, navel gazing.
I love that phrase. So good. Just looking in. But did paying attention to the world around you, is that kind of what you're saying, that helped you?
Yes. Yeah, no, that is it. It is definitely like paying attention, like an outward, like paying attention. And I think like that is like why I'm like really drawn to nature poetry particularly. Whenever I lived in St. Andrews and I would get stressed about like work or life or whatever, I would like go for runs along this coastal path and I would hear these birds like in the bushes and like, see like rabbits like jumping along the path, literally like primroses growing from rock. Like I don't even understand how that works. Like flowers growing from out of rocks, like on the coastline, like the rocky coastline. And like I would just see all of this life persisting, and like I was like, oh my goodness. And also the sea, you could see the sea and it was continually moving, and like I would always be reminded of like, oh, like life is persisting and is continuing beyond me. Like sometimes it feels as if like I am the only engine of my life, and if I don't do something, nothing will happen. I think that's like a deep fear, is like I'm like really scared of like life passing me by if I don't like make stuff happen, when actually like then go like for me like those runs were really helpful in reminding me like I am not the engine of my life. And that's actually why the New York is so hard, is that like I think that nature is an accessory rather than like its own. I feel like the power and the force of nature is not as obvious, apart from like when it rains and we just cannot avoid the rain.
Right.
But like I think that like it's like the seasons are kind of irrelevant, and like the city just will continue. Like the city works on a 24-hour cycle of like just like hustle and like working and grinding. Like, you wake up at 6 a.m. and the coffee shops are already open. Like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like, and everyone is like going to work, and like I don't even know if the subways ever stop. Like, do they? I think they might run through the night. Like,
oh yeah, I think they run through the night.
And I just think that like that, so it's actually really easy to forget that like if the city is a machine, it is like oiled and like just like kept moving by the people. It's like it doesn't seem like it's being sustained by like these other forces. So it's really easy to forget that like there are other forces that are like propelling life. And so I think that's why like for me, I'm like, I definitely need to be reminded that people are not the only forces of life, which includes I'm not the only force of my life. Yes, I think that like practicing attention to like just what stuff that goes on without my intervention is like really helpful for me. And also like so nice. My mom literally was just like, Kate, just like actually just have fun. Enjoyment is the most sincere thanks. Like that was a really good phrase that I don't remember, some theologian wrote about that.
Wow.
Because I think like for me it's ingrained to just like refuse a gift that I'm given. But like if I gave someone a present, say I got someone like a piece of jewelry and they wear it like every day since I bought it for them, I'm like, oh, that makes me so happy. Like that makes me so happy. So I feel like that's the same with like this opportunity for me living in New York, or like if I think about like my relationship to God, like instead of me being like I'm a worm, I don't deserve this, and scorn it, and so you then spend the whole time living in New York just like saying you don't deserve this, Kate, you don't deserve being here, like who are you to be here and be doing something you love, like how embarrassingly like spoil or whatever. Like God's like, bro here, like just like enjoy it. And I think like, and that actually really helped as well when my mom was like, hey, just like have fun, because then I really did you just forget yourself when you're having fun. That's like the beauty of fun is an actual like existential need as well, which is kind of cool.
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. How did you go from like starting to pay attention again, I guess, in New York, because it sounds like you did that pretty well back in Scotland, and then you sort of got out of that and we're looking in. When there's not a lot of nature around, do you go to the park? Like, what do you do?
Oh, well, I do now. I live very close to Prospect Park, so that really helps. Like, it's so nice. But even there was this one event in the new school, the National Book Critics Circle Awards, which was like amazing. Like, literally, I was like pinching myself the entire time. So all these amazing like writers and poets were coming and like receiving awards on our campus, and we got to attend for free because we were students. And then we snuck into the reception afterwards, and Joy Harjo was like receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award like that night. And Joy Harjo is like a massive, like, I've loved her poetry since I had even heard of her. I really wanted to talk to her, and so I did. And I was just asking her about her practice as like a poet and her advice for writers, and she was like, greet the sun every morning. She really believes in the power of nature, like it's like this like spiritual force for her, and so she's like, yeah, greeting the sun. And I was like, yeah, it is really hard to be connected to nature in the city. She said it is still the earth, and I was like, oh my gosh. She was like, New York, it's still the earth. Whoa. The earth is still here. And then like after that point, I noticed there are trees like that are, even though they're in like little plots, like I noticed that like the tree roots are like actually breaking out of the cobblestones. And then I was walking down the street, the top layer of noise is like taxis and cars and like the horns and like people yelling and whatever. But like underneath all that noise, I then heard birds were still tweeting, realizing that actually nature persists in like the most urban of urban cities. Like, it is literally crazy. So that blew my mind. So going to parks is really helpful, but also just like realizing that it's still here, and also seeing humans as nature, people with all their dogs. I remember you saying about how golden retrievers are like your little like love notes from God. I totally agree.
Yes,
same. Like, they're my favorite, and now I think of you every time I see them, which is really
that's
cute.
so sweet.
Yeah.
Yes, I said years ago that when I was in college, I was camping in the mountains with my friends, and I was like, oh, I always feel loved by God when I see a golden retriever. Like, oh, you put that in my path, and it's just such a sunny, happy dog. And I saw multiple that day. And then when I was coming to New York last year, which is the week that I really felt this strong sense in my heart of, oh my goodness, I need to move here. That weekend, I saw like 30 golden retrievers. I just count them, and they were everywhere. And obviously they're common in New York, but I really do feel like I see them more than most people.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's so
lovely. There's just so much to notice if you pay attention, and so many things to be delighted by. Honestly, in New York, if obviously there's lots of hard things and dirty things and sad things too, but there is a lot to pay attention to that can really be beautiful.
I think the worst thing about the city, and it is true, is that like it can harden you.
Yes.
It can make you like dismissive, or like just like have blinkers to a lot of like, things. Obviously, to survive, sometimes we do just have to like get on with our day.
Right.
But I think that also it's like it is good to practice attention to that too, because actually, like what I said, the city doesn't revolve around us. Simone Weil is this French philosopher, and her like core argument is like for attention as this like radical act, and it's necessary in any work of justice. And she said attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Yeah. And I think that like, because obviously like if you don't pay attention to someone who like in their need and seeing them as a human, and like really listen to them and make space for them, or like see them, then like the way that you can help them is like totally limited.
Okay, that's interesting, and it makes me think of, because I kind of wanted to talk to you about your thoughts on just our generation being a little Gen Zer in New York City with this kind of like deep philosophical, poetic mind. And I feel like a lot of the things that we've touched on already apply to that, but it made me think of this thing that one of my friends said recently. She's like, I feel like the more time I spend scrolling on my phone or consuming social media, the less capacity I have to love and care about other people. And I was like, no, that's true.
Whoa.
And a lot of the ways that you're describing the city, I know a lot of people listening might not live here in New York, but a lot of the same things I really feel like are the attention economy and our phones and computers. And it's like the city's plastered with ads, but our phones are plastered with ads. And in the same way that we need nature to restore us from the distractions of the city. We need that to restore us from the distractions of our phone too. So what do you think about paying attention?
I love this.
What do you think?
Oh my goodness. Okay, whoa, so many cogs are turning in my head because I'm like, oh, this is so true. Oh,
I know.
What?
I need like a whiteboard or something for this conversation.
That's so cool. That's so true. Oh my word. Because I'm like even thinking practically, like the way that social media eats our time. When I was like a kid, I used to have fears that when I died, I would then rewatch my life and then like realize how much of my life I had spent like watching TV, and I was like, I had like so much stress about that. And I feel that towards social media, like how it eats time.
Yeah.
Like so much time. Unconsciously, it is designed to be addictive. In a lot of ways, we're victims to this like time black hole device thing.
Right.
If our time is eaten, then the time that we give to others is more pressurized. I know that I'm a way less attentive friend if I have 500 to-do lists in my head and I'm thinking about, I actually need to be here very soon. If I'm rushing around, you're not actually like attentive to anyone, and you're not loving to anyone, and you're also not like loving to yourself or to your life because you're not actually present. You're just like going through a lot of motions. And I feel like social media has that same effect, eating up a lot of our time, the time that we have left. We're trying to cram in a lot more into that small, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know how you're then trying to balance like, okay, I want to connect with people, but I also need to be productive because you've like procrastinated and all this stuff. And also I think that the thing with social media that I always get caught up in is how it is literally just based off of images. Like it is always based off of images, the connotations of whatever someone looks like or whatever they're posting, what it means about them. You're creating yourself online.
Right.
And in a lot of ways that's really fun. It's like a self-expression thing.
It is, yeah.
Which is like nice.
It's not completely bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think I had this moment where I was like with my friends. We're like scrolling through like her Hinge and making assumptions about the people based off of the pictures or the answer that they've done.
So quickly.
And like so quickly. And it suddenly dawned on me that like we have been trained to make so many assumptions about people's entire personality and self based off of what they look like because we've been raised on Instagram, social media, where people's self is reduced to images. And I think that then we come to people when we meet them face to face with assumptions about who they are, which means that we won't be listening properly. I feel like sometimes social media like kills curiosity because it makes us have assumptions. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. And I think that there's words that have been floating in my mind around this idea for a long time is like, I feel like it scratches our itch or our impulse that's just innate in humans to connect and to create. I think we want to connect with others and we want to create and make things. And so seeing someone's photo, commenting, tagging someone, that is like a shadow of a connection. And I think that creating, making a post, making a story, having a funny idea and posting about it is a shadow of creating. And I'm not talking about like people who post beautiful singing videos or really thought out comedy. I'm not saying that it's all bad at all. I just think it's an interesting thing that it's like, okay, this is a little part of that, of what we're kind of made to do, but it doesn't.
It's not a supplement for it.
It's not a supplement for it. And it ends up in a lot of ways, I think, trying to replace or distract. And I've even noticed myself as a creative or just someone who has big emotions and gets excited about things. Sometimes and I'm curious if you relate to this, like I'll get a great idea or I'll feel a negative or positive, really strong emotion and I'll grab my phone and start scrolling. And especially with a great idea, it's like, I don't know if my brain is telling me you need to go on Instagram and see if there's other people that have done something like this idea or something. And I guess this goes back to paying attention too, but I almost feel like sometimes things that are actually beautiful and deep in life are unbearable for us. And we are trying to find a substitute for that in our quick little like technology scroll. It's too much to look at the actual beautiful thing. And so we have to just...
Yes, that's so true.
I'm curious what you think of that as a writer. Maybe, tie that into your writing. I don't know.
I love that. I have a friend. She's so cool. She is about to go and do her master's in theology and the arts, but her like whole thesis is about how terror and awe are like really tied together.
Oh,
and
so
it's like
cool.
where you meet the sublime. You know, a lot of the romantics, like William Wordsworth, all these like nature poets, they were like, oh yeah, you meet the sublime in beauty of nature. But then her thesis is like the war poets, so the people during the First and Second World War, writing these poems about like extreme violence and like just terror, and how that led them to also led them to this experience of the sublime of God in a kind of like contrasting way. And I think that like what you just said about like whenever either feeling a big emotion or just experiencing any sense of like magnitude in life, it is like it's overwhelming, and I think it's like a fragment of like the largeness of God, like this sublime. And so we're like, and then we're like, it's so overwhelming that we just like, well, of course, like we'll just divert our attention to like this. It's like a microwave meal as well. I feel like what you were saying is so true about like the connection. Like I crave connection. It's so much more effort to like even call a friend rather than just texting, like the quick fix versus like the real deal, especially with experiencing beauty or like emotions. It is just like we're just avoidant. I think that it's like it's effort. It's like the path of least resistance is to passively consume something rather than to like actually sit in your feelings or sit in the moment. I think also a lot of us are afraid of silence. Like I've been hearing this study referred to a lot of the time, but how literally the psychologist did this study where a number of people were like given electric shocks, and they said, oh, that was so sore that I would literally like I would pay money to never have to feel that again. Wow. And then those same people were like put in a room in silence for 15 minutes, and like a majority of them ended up shocking themselves with the same shock because they couldn't bear like the feeling of like just sitting in silence and being alone with their thoughts. And I was like, whoa, that's so real. And for me, sometimes previously it's been I'm scared to like acknowledge emotions, but also I just like find it unbearable to think that I'm not being productive. So like, and weirdly, going on my phone and scrolling feels productive. That's like completely wrong. But like,
I relate to that.
Yeah, but like weirdly that, or even it's just like it doesn't feel productive, but it's like I'm distracted enough that I like don't think about the fact that I'm not being productive. Whereas if I was silent, then I would be like, I don't feel productive right now.
Yes.
Which is like a practice I'm trying to do. Like for Lent, I'm like trying to at some point each day just do nothing and like be in silence.
That's good.
And sit with that feeling, that uncomfortable feeling of not being productive. Because I think that like we have value intrinsically, and I need to like practice that and remind myself that we have value intrinsically in just being. And that's like a big part of like my relationship with God right now, is just like realizing that like I have value to him by just like existing rather than like having to like impress him or please him or anything like that. Which is actually kind of why I got like that tattoo years ago.
Wait, can you describe it for people who are just listening?
It's like a little olive branch on my wrist, and like it's like a little line drawing. It's really pretty. But yeah, it symbolizes like the John 15 passage, which is remain in me and I'll remain in you. For no branch can bear fruit unless it remains in the vine. And like it's such a poetic, it's so poetic.
It is beautiful.
But it's just like, for me, it reminds me of like, when it all comes down to it, what matters is that I remain in God, and like that is enough. Like I don't need to be collecting like all of these friends who think highly of me, or like I don't need to be writing all these award-winning poems. I don't need to be like making loads of money. I like, you know what I mean? Like I think that actually what matters is that I exist. I have value because I exist. I was like, God decided to make me exist.
Yeah, you didn't make yourself.
Yeah, I did not make myself. And like I need to remain in him. And that extra point of for no branch can bear fruit unless it remains in the vine. So like any fruit of my life, so like in the Bible it says like, you know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness and self-control. Like all of those like good qualities I can't manufacture in myself. Like it is actually all from God, which is like just such an important thing that I need to remember. I need to look at my wrist more often. That's all I can say. I just need to look at it more often. But
okay.
yeah.
That's so good. Wow. We're almost out of time. And I know we barely even talked about your actual projects that you've been working on. But I think we got such a beautiful insight into your mind, which I feel like gives us insight into your work. But is there anything about your work, your poem Gray, or your articles that you've been doing of interviews with musicians, is there anything with that same idea of paying attention or going into the deep emotions or into the reality of life rather than running away? Because I can imagine that you're not scrolling on Instagram while you're trying to write an essay or a poem or an article. So is there anything that ties in there with your work as a poet and a writer?
Yes, great question. The Gray video is a brilliant I guess example of it, because
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I basically, it originated as an essay that I wrote as like a class exercise. We read Maggie Nelson's Bluets, which is basically this whole book of fragments about the color blue. So she like collected loads of facts about the color blue and like where like the blue significance in different cultures, and like how I can't even remember which ancient Greek poet, one of them, didn't even use the word blue. Like the word blue didn't exist in their vocabulary, so they called the sea wine dark and all this stuff. So that's like a really interesting concept about the blue. Basically, really good book about the color blue. And so then we were like, oh, write your own and choose your own color. And I would have chosen blue because I love the color blue, or like yellow or green, like some nice color. But like the color gray, I literally hate it. I despise it, and I hate dreary days. And that's something that I was like really grateful for, to move away from Scotland, because it does get rainy sometimes, or like foggy, and so I like was really grateful to be removed from that. But so I basically wrote this essay about the color gray and my like complex relationship with it, because I feel like it really symbolized my discontent, because I just like I would like my like emotion, like my emotional state would be determined by the weather. Like if it's a rainy day, I would just be like upset and be like sad that I couldn't change it.
Yeah.
And then the more I thought about it, like gray also like symbolized all these other things in my life of like, or in everyone's life, like aging, and like for being a woman, like aging being this thing that we're not allowed to do, or like that we should resist. So like my mom is like, she's great, she's very cool, like she also loves it, like it's not no shade to her but she's like, I will dye my hair blonde until the day I die. And I was like, honestly, maybe same, but also I do think gray hair looks good on women. But anyway,
I know,
just
you
like
don't have
this
to
idea.
decide yet. Yeah.
But like, and then like grayness, like the gray of skin, like whenever like someone is sick or if they're dead. And then I was like, oh my goodness. So I was just like, and also I feel like gray as an emotion, the emotion that's attached to gray for me is like boredom or like depression. And like that was something that like I don't like sitting in, like I find it intolerable, but it's also like it is just an existential reality. So I was just like basically trying to explore all of that stuff. So I was writing it out, and I was like asking my friends what gray represented to them, and then I just like I ended up recording them reading out their quotes, and I like put it all together with these like videos that I took of like gray things in my life, and also like archival films and like adverts and stuff that I found online. And then like I put it all together, this massive like montage film about the color gray. So I feel like I don't remember. To do with attention and things. What was the question again?
Well, I think that does exactly tie in. I was just thinking about all the thoughts we've been kind of pouring over, how that might tie into your work as a writer, but even what you said about gray representing boredom or stillness, and that's kind of the same thing, or like we're scared to be bored, but when we do, it's really good for us. And and it
was good as well for me, because when I made that piece, it made me appreciate the color gray. Like now and also like on rainy days, like I'm less like resistant to it. Like I'm actually like, oh, like there is beauty in gray days, like you know, like being cozy, or like, you know, like deciding to read, or like a friend of mine, like he loved the mist in Scotland, like that was his favorite weather, and because he said that it made like the Scottish landscape look more like dynamic. And like I was like, wow, like it just is a change of perspective that's needed. Like instead of like me just constantly being like just being mad at the color gray, it made me like appreciate it and appreciate aging and like confronting like the reality of like of death. Like it's a thing and it's real, but also there's beauty, and there is like gray, when on gray days, like other colors are elevated. Like we notice other colors when other things are gray. And like, I don't know. So I think that also paying attention, I think also helps weirdly change your perspective. Like sometimes you can work your way through a difficulty that you're like a difficult mindset that you're stuck in, which was really cool. Cause I totally was like, ew, I don't want to write gray doesn't deserve an essay. Gray doesn't deserve a video poem to be made about it. Like what an ugly color. And now I'm like, oh, gray's kind of a cool color.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice. It's also like, you know, complex, but yeah, it's nice to appreciate it now more. So yeah.
I love that, Kate. That's so good. And reminds me too of what we're talking about, of just nature insists and the seasons change, and you know, each day is going to be different, and there are things we can't control about that. And that's good because it's bigger than us.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Kate. This has been a really delightful conversation. I think a little more introspective than some of my others, and I'm really excited about that because you're just brilliant. Where can we find you? Where can we find your work?
Ooh, good question. On Instagram, Kate P. Millar with an A, so KatePmillar. And then my YouTube channel is Kate Millar Films, which is kind of cool. But I've it's small projects. I haven't put anything new since the Gray video. That was only a few weeks ago.
And then your articles too.
Oh yeah,
I can link also in the show notes.
Yeah,
so
my articles.
journalism.
At Wood Magazine, I'm like regularly writing for them. So you'll see some new interviews soon, which is exciting.
Amazing.
But yeah, so yeah, all over the place. I'm just constantly sending poems and essays out to people.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting up with my rambles.
It was a delight. I feel like everyone's probably going to leave this conversation and go, observe nature, pay attention, process their big emotions, pay attention to their friends. Yeah. It's going to be good.
Yeah. I start sentences not knowing where they're going to end. So hopefully. It's
a delight for all of us. So. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks for sharing your insight as well. It's
of course.
Good.
And all right, friends, we will see you again next week. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Tears and Joy Podcast, and send this to a friend who you think might enjoy it. Take care. We'll see you later.